Anyway, but no, okay. So Margaret McCartney, GP in Glasgow, wrote a beautiful book, and I can't even read my own writing now, so I can't remember what it's called. The Patient Paradox, that's right, an absolute classic, and has now written a book on private health screening. I believe she gives it a cautious welcome in that one. So, Jonty Hivesage. On the right, it's great to see Jonty. He's a local GP near where I am on the Walworth Road. Media personality, appears on The Street Doctor and a thing called Smokehouse, which I understand is works to get children to stop their parents smoking. Is that right? Have I got that right way around?
That is right, yeah.
That is right.
I'm slightly disappointed I didn't make it onto that list. Where's this list of incredible GPs?
Well, I'm not on it. I'm not on it because I'm not a GP.
No, true.
If it was the other way around, if it was how parents can stop their children smoking, you'd have a client immediately. Then now on my left, Roy Lilly. Roy Lilly, fantastic, a health service manager, entrepreneur, runs the most successful blog on medical management, and is also, by the way, a magician. So, know that, but he's a magician. And then on my left, oh gosh, this is embarrassing. I'm so sorry. It'll come back to me. I'm sorry. I've just forgotten. I'm sorry. Oh, well. We better move on.
Excuse me. He's my husband.
Anyway. I knew I'd seen you somewhere before. Somewhere before. Now then, this is all about press and media, so we're going to see how good they are first of all we start. So I picked up at Harrogate Station, we have 4 randomly chosen newspapers, each with health story, and this is from this morning. And so we're going to pick on random stories. Well, they're not random because I've circulated them for you. But Jonty, here's a copy of the Daily Express, leads on police close to Madeline breakthrough. And apparently it turns out that Princess Di's chauffeur kidnapped her, according to the Daily Express. But there you are, Jonty, your health story is on page 9. Now, Margaret, you get the Times, so you've got a good story on page 6. Roy, you get the Daily Mail, so I've just got to quickly put these gloves on. There we go. So, here we go. So, Roy, you can have a look at one of the stories here, all about diabetic screening. There you are. And Claire, we've got for you, what have we got? Telegraph Sports. So you've got the should Roy Hodgson play Joe Hart or not story. So that's all for you. Okay, so what I want each person to do is to give us a little bit 2 minutes intro just to explain themselves and to set the scene for what we're going to talk about. So Jonty, we'll kick off with you. You have 2 minutes. If you go over that, you will be sectioned. That's the one power that I still have.
To explain myself,
yes.
Sounds like so I'm Jonty, and I'm a GP, as Simon says, and that actually is fundamentally what I am. I'm 4 days a week in the practice. I have done some work with the media, which I'm assuming is why I am here. And I guess predominantly, it's important to say that media has been mainly television, because I don't know whether it'll come up in our discussions, but actually I think there's a lot of difference in terms of how different forms of media cover some of the stories that we're going to be talking about. In particular, I think the print media we all struggle with. So that's me. I'm doing a lot more work now with clinical commissioning. So I'm one of the GP leads in Southwark for clinical commissioning. And that's quite interesting, because actually in terms of my kind of contact with the media, up until now I've tended to be either on TV or radio or whatever as an expert. And actually I've found that in general I've been treated with a lot of respect. And actually I've met I think people who are incredibly motivated to inform the public. In my role now on the CCG, I have to say my kind of contact with journalists is that I'm meeting people who are a lot more cynical, and I'm having to think a lot harder about what I say. So already I think I've got I'm gaining an experience of another side of the media that I'm certainly having to, that's a little bit more politically motivated perhaps. Okay. But I guess that's where I'm at the moment.
I like that. This is what he says, he's treated with a lot of respect, and this is the man who's been on Jeremy Kyle. So that's
that was supposed to be a secret.
No, it isn't now, is it? No.
Okay, so I thought I would start by doing a conflict of interest declaration, which is that I earn money from writing, not very much money from writing a book, it has to be said, but I do get money from Radio 4 and from the BMJ and for the various other bits of media work that I do. And I think that is a conflict of interest, and I think I should declare that to you, because clearly media is something that I earn money from. usually what I write about is stuff that's fairly critical of the media, and usually I like to take evidence and try and dissect it and chop it around and explore it and hold things up for questioning. And I think that's really important to do. A lot of the time, I think when experts are invited onto programmes about things, the evidence for their expertise isn't really always held up to scrutiny. And I think we know how many clinical trials go unreported. We know that many health interventions, for example, health checks, are purely politically motivated, not evidence-based interventions at all. And I think my duty as a doctor is to share that uncertainty with the people that I'm writing for.
Okay, thank you. Roy, you with us?
Sorry, I'm just reading this about this woman's breasts here.
All right, good.
Of which more later.
Indeed.
Seems like quite a lot more later. Anyway, right. What do I think about the media? Well, there are two types of story. There's the new wonder pill cures cancer and verrucas in a week type story, which, you know, the press and media all love all that. And then there's the bungling manager's story, of course, which they love almost as much. So you've got the two ends, I suppose, of the health service, you know, the wonderful stuff that it does and the times that it makes a mess. What really pains me, having worked quite a lot with hospitals and communications departments and so on, is the way they go about trying to manage communications. And I always leave them with one thought, and I can say, look, you can polish a cowpat, you can plait a cowpat, you can sprinkle it with Chanel No. 5 and spray it with fairy dust, but it's still a pile of shit. And you know, we need to be much more, I think, transparent and open with what it is that we do when we deal with the media. Much more frank. I mean, organisations still don't meet in public. Some CCGs don't still meet in public. I just think it's daft. The media's there. They're not going to go away. And if you look at the stories that are in them, I mean, I won't do the stories now, but there are 3 stories in here which are really based largely on rubbish. But we read them, don't we?
That's the Claire story, isn't it? Sorry.
Yes.
Okay, go on.
Yes. Leading doctors said.
Yes. Yeah, let's go over. Okay.
Turnover, yeah. So, you know, that's, it's not rocket science. The NHS gets a bad press when it does bad things. And that will be true of Tesco's, British Rail, anywhere else you like in the whole world. If you do bad stuff, you'll end up with a bad press. If you do good stuff, you won't end up with a good press. Because good stuff is what you're supposed to do, and there is no virtue in virtue. You're supposed to do good stuff. And I don't think it's any more complicated than that.
Okay, lady in yellow.
What would you like me to ask? What was the question?
You were supposed to give 2 minutes, kind of a background and introduction to you and the media, but actually, let's move on, shall we?
The day I said this in my opening speech, though, the day I took office was a real rude awakening. But I had another rude awakening when I was rung up. I was rung up on a Saturday afternoon. I was just listening to the radio, lying on the bed by a journalist, and he asked my views about flu. About flu vaccines. And I just said, well, and there was a shortage, there was a usual crisis, you know. And then I said, well, actually, I didn't think you should, even if you could afford it, I said you should still have to queue. You know, you shouldn't, just because you had money, get a flu vaccine ahead of those that might need it. Then I woke up at about 5 o'clock the following morning. I was listening to the BBC World Service, and I was top of the news for the BBC World Service. And I just thought, oh my God, what have I said? And it ran for the whole day that I had dared to say that there should be rationing according to need of something like the flu vaccine. And it was as if I'd said that, you know, you should put all children in jail or something. So I've had a rude awakening with the media. I've realised how powerful they are and how you've got to be always very, very careful of what you say, because otherwise you might be in the front page of the news.
Well, why do you keep looking at yourself on the screen?
I thought that somebody's tweeting us at the same time.
Oh, yes. Okay. Yes. By the way, if you tweet from the stage, you are definitely banned, okay? I'm not having that at all.
A challenge.
No, okay. Now then, so... Right, so Claire then, what do you think? Joe Hart in goal or not?
Listen,
No.
I went through this, okay? I have read this and I cannot understand a word. This tells us about medicine, doesn't it? Because I know nothing
tells
about
us about
football. Nothing. Now, if this was a medical journal, it would be made, we'd all be arguing now about it's not patient-centred, it's not, there's health literacy and we've got to make it simple. I cannot understand a single word of this.
Okay, Claire, shut up for a second. Good. Now, what I will give you a paper because I'm being fair, so you can have the Daily Telegraph, but only so you can later on tell us about that story in today's Telegraph. Don't reveal it for a second. So, now, so we've done this. Genuinely, these are the stories of today's papers, and I thought we'd start off a little bit, really. For example, you've got a story there. Walking reduces the risk of breast cancer, and you've got
interesting than me.
Okay, and Jonty, you've got a story on exercise beats diabetes.
Yeah, I have.
Folks, how are we going to? So now you're both in Good Morning or whatever it is, and two completely contradictory stories. How are you going to respond to this then?
Well,
you start off, Margaret.
Okay, I don't do that kind of media.
Well, you are now. So.
but I don't in general, because I think it's a bad way often to get stuff across in general. So this is really interesting, and this is a part of my campaign against relative risk. So it's basically saying that 70,000 women were in some study, and they walked for 7 hours a week and had a 14% less risk of developing the disease. That doesn't mean anything. I need to know what your risk was to start with. It's rubbish. I think that all newspapers should have a statistics desk before anything's allowed to be published to do with anything with medicine. It should be checked by someone who understands that this kind of information is close to useless, and it shouldn't be allowed to be published.
Okay. But Jonty, you've got a story that says walking, and which obviously is good for you, is curing diabetes. This is a good story.
Yes, I'm feeling slightly intimidated by Margaret at the moment, because I'm clearly exactly the sort of media doctor that she doesn't like. So,
Yes.
That's Christian.
Why do you think you're sitting together?
So yeah, that's great. So I am one of those doctors that sort of confidently presents these stories to patients, and I guess the issue for me always is about how we can encourage people to be healthier, how we can encourage people to have a better quality of life, how we can encourage people to lead happier, healthier lives. So I am very often going to take a story like this and try always, I guess, in the work that I do, to thread a little sort of real medicine into it. So this is kind of an opportunity for me. This is a story about diabetes. It's a story about some research that's going to be going on. I never read the papers, so this is the first time I've seen this, but it's a story about 2 different diets that are being trialled, basically, to see which one is most likely to reduce the incidence of type 2 diabetes. So what this is for me is predominantly an opportunity to talk about diabetes and the fact that we're seeing an increased incidence of it, what symptoms people should be looking out for, when they should see the doctor, what the risks are, and so on. So sometimes I think these stories, although quite clearly at the moment this is a trial that's only just beginning, so it's pretty uninteresting. So we've not got very much to kind of announce, but it does give us an opportunity to do a little bit of education and informing around it. The difficulty is that if you went and tried to talk about a story like this on the television, they wouldn't be terribly interested, because actually it is quite dull. They've heard enough about diabetes. Is it visual enough? How can we convey this in an interesting and entertaining manner? So that's one of the things that I struggle with a lot, is that I may have something that I think, look, this is really important. We need to be talking about this. But actually, if it's not visually interesting, you'll find it very, very hard to get it onto any of the TV programs.
I did love that phrase you said, I never read the papers.
Yeah,
this is the man who's been the Mail on Sunday's health correspondent.
I have written a couple of times. It is true, I have written something for the Mail on Sunday. Okay. You know a lot more about me than I thought you did.
I know, I have a very sad life, I really do. Yeah. So, Claire, Torres then or Eto'o for the striker position? Now, you've got a story there. Could you share it with us for...
I can, but can I just say something on the diabetes story?
Yeah.
Because I heard it this morning on breakaway or break day, because I was up quite early. Daybreak, thank you. And
Roy has this lovely look as someone who really wishes he was somewhere else. It's just brilliant.
No, it's just that I do Daybreak, and I'm pissed off that you didn't realise.
And the line for this story was, and I heard it was, go to your GP to discuss before you stop your anti-diabetic drugs. And I thought, oh my God, we're now going to be all having patients who are going to be queuing up to talk to us because they're doing exercise, and should I then stop my anti-diabetic drugs? So I did hear it. The story I have been given is actually a very interesting story. It's mental health disorders amongst Afghan veterans.
Yeah,
and the story is that there's a massive rise. In fact, there's a 27% increase in mental health disorders amongst Afghan. And they do give they don't give the denominator, they do give a number. They say there's 5,000 military personnel were diagnosed. So you could work it out if you were good at mental arithmetic, if that is represented.
That's not why I've given you the story.
No, I know it isn't. The reason he gave me the story, because he didn't disclose his conflict of interest, it starts, here it is. This is what I live with every single day. This is why my children said the thing that unites us after 25 years of marriage is competition.
Go on.
Right.
Get on with it.
Right, here you go. One expert last night. Well, I wonder which expert that might be.
Go on, don't break the
Simon.
suspense. Go on.
One expert last night said that increases may be due to more people being encouraged to report problems sooner.
Said who?
Said Professor
Thank you.
Sir Simon
Good.
Wesley.
Okay, you can shut up now. Good. Okay. There we are. That was excellent, wasn't it? Right, Roy. It took time though, didn't it?
This is the dullest thing I've ever done. Okay, well, I've got the Daily Mail, which I have to say my mother reads every day, so that's mine.
So does mine.
Yeah, and I pay for it, so there you go. Right, well, there are three stories in here too, which I think are quite interesting. It starts with Labour's cover-up on failing hospitals, and it runs to like 2 pages. It's quite a complicated story about whether or not the CQC were prevailed upon to hide some truths about some bad care during the time of the last election. Really, I mean, the story itself is not, it probably isn't accurate. It doesn't really implicate Andy Burnham, and it just looks to me like the CQC were trying to do their job at a difficult time around the election, was not to put something out which they had to put out, and not put it out in a political environment so as to condemn the politics of the health service. So I think they were kind of doing their job, but who knows? I mean, the CQC is such a basket case of an organisation anyway. I don't know why we bother with it. There's no point in inspection, is there? If you turn up and it's bad, it's too late. If you turn up, it's good, well, you needn't have bothered going. So. Sorry. They just turn up and count the dead, don't they, really? But anyway. No self-respecting industry uses an inspection model anymore, but hey, if you've got £100 million to throw away, we might as well do it. So I've got no sympathy really with the CQC, but the message here, I think, for us, is that it's going to get more political. We know when the election is going to be. It's in 2015. We can name the day. Unlike previous elections where we didn't know where it was going to be, now we do know when it's going to be. And everything that the politicians are doing now around the NHS is with the election day in 2015 in mind. And you saw it here with Larlight yesterday. You all sat there and said, oh, we're going to get rid of Quaff. Thank you very much, Jeremy. Actually, what he's doing is he's a magician. He's saying, watch Quaff disappear, and he's sliding his hand into your wallet and saying, and I've got the money. You're all going to get a pay cut. The party's over, boys and girls. That's what they're doing now. He's going to take Quaff and he's going to take your money. So he's going to say we stop the GPs earning $100,000 a year and all the rest of it. You know. Now wait.
Okay, so you're drifting away a little bit from me here, just a trifle.
I'm getting on to the. No, I like the smell of fermenting money. I'm pleased I'm here.
We're not paying you.
Yes, shut up. God, what I'm saying is that this is about politics. It's not about the NHS, and I think that the NHS is going to be the battleground for the next election because the Tories score quite badly on the health service and Labour score quite well. They're going to go all out to try and discredit Andy Burnham. They're going to go all out to try and discredit what they regard as the Labour legacy of being handed a basket case for an NHS, and the Tories are going to have to save the day. So that's what they're trying to do, and you will be caught in the crossfire of that. So I think that story is a bit of a warning for us. This one is walking an hour a day can cut the risk of breast cancer.
We did that whilst you were asleep, right?
Well, I know, I liked it because it says if you walk for an hour a day, if you can, an hour's walking at 2.5 miles an hour a day, an hour, and 7 times at 40, you could be 20 miles away, and we wouldn't have to worry. So that's probably that's that one. And the last one, which is where is it? Page 18, which is an equally dull story: the abortion clinics with no questions asked policy. Now, this is a story that, as far as I can see, has been stoked up by Dr. Sarah Wollaston, who is in danger of having a nasty accident because when she will jump on any passing bandwagon. And so...
Roy, they like her.
Well, I
just warning you, they like her.
But they don't like me. The BPAS, who knows a thing about this, said, look, in 10 years at the BPAS, she's never heard of a woman walking into a clinic and simply saying, I want an abortion because I don't want a boy or a girl. The whole story is built up and then discredited. And so, that's just a kind of example of a bandwagon jumper.
Good. Well, you lost your audience at that point, Roy. I must say, you were doing well until then.
I don't care. I'm being paid £5,000 for an appearance, and I'm just happy to be here.
I'm doing it for free. Gosh. Yeah. Now, we'll take questions from the audience. So think of your questions in a second. I don't know how do you all come up to microphones,
we have different mics,
we've got different
2,
mics.
4, 6,
so whilst
1, 3,
people
5.
are thinking about what to ask, I want to ask all the panel then how would they have reacted to Sunday's story in the Sunday Times. So we're on to GPs now. Sunday Times tells us that 2,000 children would still be alive if GPs were better. Now, she says better at diagnosing symptoms. So that was Sunday's story. 2,000 children, you're responsible for killing them. How are you going to, panel, how are you going to respond to that one? Or how should the profession respond? That was this Sunday's story, last Sunday's story. How would you be responding to that? 2,000 children would be alive if GPs were better.
I wouldn't respond to that.
I've asked you, so you can't get away with that.
Well, I think sometimes it's really important not to. I think sometimes we get drawn in. I see this often because I say I don't tend to get involved in the sort of political side of things. One of the things that I notice quite often is that people do get drawn into these discussions because somebody points a finger. And actually very often, genuinely, I think it's better just not to respond. We have this, I write locally in Southwark, and you'll have lots of comments about sort of privatisation of the NHS and so on, about the column that I write. I'm not writing about that, but that's because people want the opportunity to air their particular gripe.
You can't get away with that. You're doing Daybreak, you're doing this Good Morning, you've done your bit on diabetes walking, but then they say, now then, Jonty, what do you think about this story? You can't say, I'm not going to answer it.
They would never ask. And it's This Morning, not Good Morning. Nobody here watches daytime television, which is quite reassuring, I think.
Lucky for you, clearly. Lucky for you. You're much better watching Daybreak.
And I know this is really difficult for you, but I genuinely wouldn't ever get involved. I'm very, very clear that I will never get involved in political stories. On TV, I'm there as a doctor for that side of my kind of expertise. But
so you're going to duck the question, although it's not a political story, it's about children dying. That's not political. That's about general practice. Margaret.
It's who's to blame. That's the question.
I mean, healthcare is political. There's no getting away from that.
Lean forward.
Sorry, healthcare, I think, is political. So I don't think you can distinguish the two or separate the two of them out. And the first response I would have to that is to go back and find the paper and dissect it and find out actually who made the crap abstract. And it's almost certain does not justify the headline. So that's what I would do. I was on, we did this bounty thing. I had an article on the BMJ a while ago about the odious bounty bags and the equally odious Emma's Diary, which I hope the college gets rid of very soon. And I was asked to go on a morning programme, I can't remember which one it was, but it was very early in the morning, and I'd agreed to answer questions about the bounty campaign, and which I did. But with 2 minutes to go, the producer phoned and asked me if I could comment on some other story, and I said I can't comment on that because I haven't read the paper, and she was very pissed off. So right at the end, the guy who's quite rotund on the sofa.
Eric Pickles.
No, Eamon Holmes said to me, now Dr. McCartney said in the paper today there's a story about Miley in class is putting breast milk in the tea of her relatives. What do you think of that? And I said, I'm not going to comment on that. And he said, well, you have to comment, you're a doctor. I said, well, I've got no comment to make on a celebrity story. And he then tweeted that I was very unprofessional for not having to reply to that. Whereas I think it was absolutely the right thing to do. I don't care at all what Mylene Klass and her breast wants to do. It's up to her. I have no right whatsoever to comment on that. And it was completely wrong of the media of him to put me in that position.
Roy has just said her breast quite interests him, so we're not going to ask him.
Simon, I'll take
So, Claire, lady at the back.
But I would have to answer on your behalf. I would have to. I couldn't duck this. Right. So what I would say, I'd say something like, any death of a child that can be avoided is a tragedy. And I'd say, and I'd be very, very sorry if my profession was responsible for a single death. But what I'd also say is that we know that only 40% of GPs have actually had any training in paediatrics, and that's why we're committed to extended and enhanced training, and that's why we want the government to work with the Treasury to find the resources for us. And finally, I would say, and it also highlights that if we had GPs spending longer with their patients and their communities, we would be able to do more. At the moment, we only get 9% of the budget for 90% of the activity. So I would turn the whole thing round. I certainly would apologise, because you have to, whatever the story, somebody that's lost a child is a tragedy. And if we've been responsible for that, it's a tragedy. So there's no point trying to fudge it.
So now you see how fun it is living at our house, don't you? But
Simon, can I say?
Wait. So Roy, that was the headline. 2,000 children would still be alive for GPs.
I read the story, and it patently it didn't stack up. But you have to understand how the media works. You get a story that's written by a journalist. A freelance will either send it in, or a stringer, as they call someone who works for the media, will go out and be sent to do the story, or they're hunting for stories, they'll dig up stories. They go to the sub's desk, and the sub will spike a lot of the stories, or they'll pick this one up. And then it's the sub-editor's job to come up with a headline that encapsulates the story in not more than about 5 words. Freddie Starr at my hamster, that kind of a thing. And so that's the sub's job. And so the substance of the story here was that 2,000 kids had died because GPs weren't doing their job. So they condensed it. And that's where the damage is done, because I remember reading the story and the copy just did not stack up. There was a disconnect between the sub-editor's headline and the copy.
Okay, John, to your last comment, then we're going to go to the audience.
So the only thing I was going to, as a professional, as a GP, I love Claire's response, but I think very often that's why we end up responding, is because we're trying to really respond for our profession. If you think about it from a patient's perspective, actually what they've just seen in that response is 2 people pointing fingers at each other. Somebody saying 2,000 kids have died, somebody else saying, well, that's because GPs don't get enough time or money to resource themselves. And so actually what they're reading is, number one, confusing, and number 2, just looks like people having a tit for tat, which is kind of comes back to why I said sometimes it's better to step out of it, because maintaining some sense of kind of sort of credibility and sort of expertise is really important. And whilst it is political, of course it's political, actually if you start getting into that fighting, then we'll lose the trust. Currently politicians aren't trusted, we are. If we start joining them in the ring, then actually I think we risk losing that confidence and trust that we have in the public.
Okay, so going to take a question? Can you say who you are?
Yeah.
Just because everyone, I'm sure, knows who you are, but I don't.
Very well, fine. Martin Brunette, GP in Guildford. High-profile media GPs or media doctors are in a very powerful position, very privileged position, and millions of people may make health choices depending on what they say. If one of them has a financial conflict of interest, that could be very damaging to patients. I don't know anything about you, John T, so I'm not suggesting you do. I have no idea whether you do or not. Yep. But how do we protect the public from that danger?
Okay, so protecting the public from conflicts of interest. All right. Is tradition here, do we stack questions up, or do we do them? We stack them up. Okay, so it's like calling in rowing boats, isn't it? Number 6, come in, number 6.
Yeah, thanks, Simon. Tony Kendrick from Southampton.
Oh, it's Tony, gosh, hello.
Hi. And I'm sorry about all the John McEnroe lookalike.
What?
Cracks. Yeah. Oops, I just did another one, sorry.
You're being stalked.
It's following up on
Not coming here again.
It's following up on John T's response to Claire, because I am slightly concerned that we as a college should be distinguished from the BMA as a doctors' union. And if the response, when a question comes up about variation in care, which we cannot deny is a reality, I think the college position on that should be slightly different from the BMA. The BMA will say, you can't blame doctors, they're working so hard and they just need more resources, they just need more doctors, and the college response, I think, needs to be more refined. It needs to talk about how we address quality of care, how we improve it, and what we can do within limited resources. We are an academic body, and we need to be thinking what we can do while we're waiting for more doctors to come along, as if they will.
Okay, all right. So, and please.
Hi there, I'm Matt Pickover. I'm a GP in rural Suffolk. I'll be as brief as I can. About 7 years ago, a free magazine in my local area came through my postbox, and it was basically full of shit, excuse my French, and pseudo-science and Reiki healing and stuff. I hope I don't offend anyone.
You get the Daily Mail, do you?
So I wrote to them and said, can I write for you and write some medicine and some science and kind of break that medical fourth wall? And then I wrote to another one and another one, and now I write for about 7 different publications, none of which you'll have heard of, and you probably read them on the toilet in a hotel lobby or something. I'm underselling myself here.
Can I just ask, what hotel lobbies include toilets?
Well, you know what I mean. I mean, basically, it's sort of disposable literature.
Or something.
But I mean, the thing that irritated me is that the things that are attractive to the media are evil doctor touched me here, or beetroot cures prostate cancer. All that sort of basically bullshit. Excuse my French. There's about 1,000 people. What I'm trying to say is that how do we actually make important things sound exciting and sexy when most people only want to know about myelin classes, lactiferous breasts, and beetroot saving your prostate or whatever.
Okay, a lot of prostates and breasts we're getting today, aren't we? Okay. And last question for the moment.
Pip Hayes, GP Exeter. When I examine my patients, I'm meant to offer them a chaperone. It's years since I've offered a chaperone, I just don't remember. But you media doctors get them to show everything on the television. Embarrassing bodies, good or bad media, is the question.
Okay. Right, so let's start serious then. Conflicts of interest. You were the only person who did declare conflicts of interest. The rest of us didn't. So important or not?
Fundamentally important.
It's
fundamentally important, and I think there is a pressing need for patients to be able to find out what the conflicts of interest are of doctors who may or may not appear to be promoting material at them. So the real problem comes when you're not aware that there's a conflict of interest. So if you've got a doctor who, for example, works for a private screening clinic, and that doctor is promoting private screening, which is entirely non-evidence-based and harmful and a waste of money, patients should know that that doctor is making money from promoting that, and that's just fundamental. So I think that the GMC should have on its registration page a little bit of space where doctors can self-declare their conflicts of interest. And I've done it in my blog for years. My conflicts of interest are that I write and I earn money from that I'm an undergraduate tutor, and I am passionate about the NHS. And if any study came out that said the NHS was shit, I would be really offended with that, and I would be really wanting to make sure that was.
Margaret, that's not a conflict of interest.
It is a conflict of interest because it could alter my perceptions in a way that I wouldn't be aware of. The problem with some doctors that work in the private sector offering crap is that they don't believe they have a conflict of interest because they think that they're offering the right thing. And I think it's really important to be aware that I could be blinkered to something terrible at the NHS because I feel so passionately about it. So I do think that it's better for me to think, could this be a conflict of interest or not? And the other issue I just wanted to pick up on, and what the media thinks is important and is not, well, the Inside Health programme that I do in Radio 4, we get loads of really fantastic emails from people who are grateful to have an adult exploration of the evidence, and people who appreciate the fact that we're saying actually the situation is uncertain. Here are the pros, here are the cons, here are the problems, here are the gaps in research. And there is an audience out there of people who would appreciate not being talked down to and being educated in a way that actually explains things rather than patronises them.
Okay, Claire, should England go back? I'm sorry. Claire, should England go back to a 4-4-2 formation or not?
In response to Tony's question, clearly I've had to do a lot of this, Tony, over the last 3 years, and I hope I have never appeared defensive, especially when we're talking about death, and especially when we're talking about children's deaths. I hope, have sight of the paper, like Margaret. I certainly would hope that I'd have sight of the article, which you can pretty quickly glean some problems, but nevertheless, it's a very delicate article, 2,000 deaths, as I said before. And my constituents, and I have to tell you this over the last 3 years, whenever I go and do any media, I talk on your behalf. It's you. And I have to be aware that it's you and not make it worse for you. I wouldn't be defensive and talk about money, But I would maybe pick out that we have training issues and we're trying to address that, etc., etc. But it's you. There'll be enough people to blame you every single day, as we've seen in the paper. And my job was, because it's running out now, is to support you. And I've had to find words to do some very difficult stuff around, where we are to blame. I don't know how I'd have defended Shipman, but I would probably continue to say Shipman was not a normal GP, blah, and then go on. So that's how I would answer that. I would never talk about money, but equally with the harsh reality, if you're, seeing 60 patients a day, errors are going to happen.
Okay. I mean, I think the question from Tony is more about the different roles of the BMA and the RCGP.
Well, he is, but I brought up in my... Okay, the BMA is clearly absent many of the times when there are issues around GPs going on. Are they not? Yeah. When was the last... I mean, I'm not being critical, but for one reason or another...
No, I think you are. I love that. You should hear her when she's being critical. Good God.
This is like, do you remember the television programme Life with a Lion?
Good. Okay, well, you have been critical. Now,
I love him, really.
Embarrassing bodies. Why do I think of you, Roy?
Well, Embarrassing Bodies is a great programme. It brings out into the open things that, maybe not it's extreme as that, but people feel there's hope and they can go and talk about these things. And so, no, I think I'm a great fan of the programme. I've seen it and I don't think it does any harm and I don't think it's a bad programme. And I think it does give people the opportunity to think about their own situation and can they go to the GP and talk frankly about things that they otherwise would have found difficult. I mean, the thing that I find most difficult in talking to the GP about is when the GP's not there.
Oh, right. Oh, okay.
When there's
we were going to say something different
when there's a child locum.
We should perhaps point out that Roy says he only wants to be seen by a GP of his own age. So you're going to find it very difficult to get care. Yes.
But if you've got a spot on your dick, you don't want to talk to someone like your daughter, do you? I mean, it's just too difficult. As far as the college and the BMA is concerned, I don't know why you bother with the BMA, to be honest. I think they opened the back door on the reforms and, you're in the mess you're in because the BMA is no good. But that's just a personal view that, we discuss over breakfast. And what else was there? Something else?
Can I ask you, though,
yes.
Because you worked for years as a journalist, I mean, is it fair to say that the media take no account of conflicts?
Conflicts of interest?
Yeah.
I can tell you about breakfast television Daybreak.
You've done the ad now, okay?
They do. I mean, they go. The BBC, I'm sure, they just go out of their way to make sure there's a balance. And if there is the slightest whiff of a conflict of interest, they just use someone else, or. So I don't. I have to say, in all honesty, I've never come across a situation where someone has gone on and sort of in a neutral position and ended up banging the drum for some particular thing, because they just won't let you do it. And they get complaints as well. The viewers write in very quickly. They're very quick to write in, and the producers just don't want to spend the rest of the week answering shed loads of mail from people who complain. So I've never seen it as a problem. I can't say that it isn't, but I've never seen it.
Hello. Okay. Amanda.
You just said Embarrassing Bodies' marvellous programme doesn't do any harm. My question would be, from the media perspective, how do you know whether the media does harm or not? I can think of numerous examples where, as far as I can see, the media put their stuff out to make an impact. They don't try and assess whether it does any harm or not. I've had a patient recently who has herself become obsessed about her body in a way that I think is very, very difficult, and she attributes it to Embarrassing Bodies, and we're having a conversation about that. I can only give that example because we happen to be having this conversation right now, but to my knowledge the media never come back and say, did we get it wrong about the Liverpool pathway or Embarrassing Bodies or indeed anything?
Right. Okay, wait, no, not yet. Now let's just get another one. Well, don't worry, you'll have, we'll both get back to that. Number 6.
I'm being gagged.
You are.
I'm David Hodges, I'm a GP. Martin Skirm, the Daily Mail, 6 months ago, wrote a particularly horrible article about GPs going back to 120 hours, and wasn't it all great in the 1950s? I wrote a response, which was published on page 67 in the bottom left-hand corner next to some of the spurious letters that went along with it. how do we respond against our colleagues who are putting out misinformation, lies and rather bad opinions?
Okay, so colleagues getting it wrong. And last one, lady there.
I'm Shbana, I'm a GP trainee in West Midlands.
Thank you.
I want to ask the media actually whether they feel any responsibility towards contributing towards demoralising an entire workforce that actually works really hard and is probably already quite low in morale because of all the publicity we face.
So let's start off with media doing harm. I think you were.
Yes,
Then John T.
Let me just say, I didn't think I'd answered the question quite that way. I was asked what did I think about embarrassing bodies, and I don't think it does any harm. I mean, but I don't know if it does any harm or not. I think the media does enormous harm. From time to regularly, I would think. I mean, look at the Miliband situation now. I don't think there's anybody in this room really that would say the Daily Mail has come out of that with, covered in glory. So, yes, I think it does do lots of harm. But from my own point of view, I saw the programme and I thought, I think that might give people the courage to come and talk to you about something that they otherwise may not have done. On the business about, do you want me to answer the next question as well?
No, let's stick with the media harm. Let's keep it to a theme. So, John T, you want to come back?
Yeah, and I do want to just, sorry, because I didn't get a chance to answer some of the other questions, so I do want to, because I think it is important. Obviously, around the conflicts of interest, I think the responsibility is fundamentally for us to ensure that but I would agree with Roy that it is always asked of me. And I am never allowed to mention products, and I am never allowed to talk about any work that I might be paid to do. And one of the reasons I think I get the work that I do is because I am fundamentally an NHS GP. I think that actually fits into a lot of the discussions that have been had around sort of embarrassing bodies and TV. And I was struck by Matt's question, which I think was, how do we make important things sexy? And there is something in this, because we can sit and we can talk about how important it is that everything is conveyed in a very accurate manner, but actually we also need to engage with patients. And it's fantastic. If you've got a Radio 4 audience, then that's wonderful, because the way to engage with a Radio 4 audience is to be talking to them about the detail, is to be talking to them about the complexity, because that's the audience. But actually that's not my patients. My patients don't listen to Radio 4, but I also need to somehow find a way to communicate to my patients about the importance of their health. So actually, we've got to be prepared to be accepting of these different styles. They are different styles that sometimes I think there's a difficult edge. There's that tension between entertainment and between kind of information and education. And I absolutely take on board the comments that Amanda made, that actually, I do think that the media is not necessarily held to account adequately for this. And the embarrassing bodies thing is difficult for me. I know the doctors who do that programme. I personally didn't do that programme for all of the reasons that you've mentioned. And I think that one of the issues that I have with that, actually, more than the nakedness and the fact that in every episode they have to have at least one penis, and that is literally written into how the program is structured. But of course what they're doing is they are managing to attract an audience with this. But importantly, they often, I think, confuse private and NHS healthcare, and that's what I struggle with, because that's where my patients end up quite confused as to what is available and what isn't available. So that for me is the biggest issue that I have with that. Yep.
Margaret, media doing harm, you don't think that can happen, do you?
Oh, I absolutely think it can do harm. I think it does constant harm. And we've got lots of evidence, for example, about the MMR debacle. But even things like, for example, at the breast cancer screening, it's taken 4 or 5 years of continued pressure to get the UK screening to change their breast screening information leaflets to say, not just come for your appointment, but make a choice about whether or not you come for your appointment. And that has been ruined by the media with Breakthrough Breast Cancer using this as a platform to say, but attend for your screening anyway, as though they have got the right to decide what women's priorities should be. I wouldn't agree with you when you say that I've got a Radio 4 audience and that's it. The reason why I do stuff for Radio 4 is because I believe in accuracy over popularity, and I think if popularity goes to such an extent that it ends up in the realm of embarrassing bodies, which we have no idea about the long-term effects of. If you want to apply for it, you can go online and get an audition form. Is that really the way to recruit people to a programme that thinks it's going to help you? And I think, where are our boundaries in that? Are we comfortable with this? Is this a good thing? I don't think so. And just in terms of how do you prove that you're doing good or bad in terms of media, I don't think you really know. I think you have to listen incredibly carefully to your feedback, and I think you have to always assume that you could be getting it seriously wrong, and you must be really attuned to that fact. And that's why I think it's really important to present things with huge attention to accuracy and care. Really.
Okay.
I have been hideously attacked.
Wait for the chairman to ask it, does she?
for daring to criticise. I think it's called Super Fat, Super Thin, whatever the programme is, and saying that it was a modern day freak show, and the language was sexualised, which it was. The advertising language was sexualised. I'm not going to repeat it here. And I have asked what the follow-up is of these people who either lose a lot of weight or gain a lot of weight. And really, that's what you want to know, isn't it? What is the follow-up of these people? Do they retain their weight loss or their weight gain? And the closest I've got to this, I mean, I saw it again with a programme that I did with a very famous superstar who I mentioned in my opening speech in case anybody wants to sue me, who went and found a patient or found somebody outside our surgery and tried to pass them off as a patient from my practice. And I just thought, what are you doing? You're actually lying on the TV. You're trying to... So this was all just for entertainment, to pluck somebody.
Quick.
I've done it.
Oh, that was it. Oh, gosh. Sorry, I didn't realise you'd stopped. It happens so rarely. It's not a thing that I'm used to. Anyway, so one last Swift question. Swift.
My name is Bert Jindal. I'm a GP in Huddersfield. I'm an LMC secretary. One of the problems you've already mentioned that over the next couple of years there's going to be a lot of electioneering, and we're going to have to get used to the fact there's a lot of negative narrative. So I'm a little bit disturbed when I hear the Royal College being negative about the BMA. Remember, the BMA isn't just a union; it's a profession. It's a professional body as well, and it is responsible for high standards and high professional standards.
Okay.
And we stand shoulder to shoulder. We are partners. The things that the Royal College identifies should be the things that we support the Royal College with, and we aim to get the resources to support the Royal College in achieving the quality.
I think we're drifting slightly away from the media, but first, can I just say it was Roy who said that?
I said the BMA was an organisation that I wouldn't spend tons to belong to.
Well,
I think it's a trade
union. You're not a doctor.
It's a trade union. And get over it. It's not the college that's speaking, it's me. And I don't think much of the BMA.
Okay, and you're not a member.
I'm not a member.
No. Okay. Right, so...
Get over it.
Round up then. We're going to finish off with the round up. And just to finish off then, so one thing that you've done, I think we have Mike Pringle about to tell us something. So, quick thing, worst thing you've ever done, John T, that doesn't involve Jeremy Kyle. Oh, sorry.
Actually, no, I'm not going to tell you the worst thing I'm going to do, but I just wanted to mention the MMR because I think there's this, again, I just want everybody to go away from here with a sense that actually we can't keep talking about the media as though they're kind of this homogenous mass.
Right.
In the middle of the MMR scare, Chris, who does this morning, gave, I think it was Richard and Judy at the time, their daughter Chloe the MMR vaccination in the middle of all of that scare in order to encourage people to have the MMR. So let's not get into this kind of them and us situation, because that's not going to help any of us in the future. And I know it's difficult. It's a difficult relationship. But actually, if you're open, if you're transparent, if you let people know what you're doing, it prevents all of this defensiveness and this kind of cynicism from arising in the first place. So I think what I don't want people to go away from here with is a sort of more embedded sense that the media is this demonic kind of organisation.
Roy, thing you most regret?
Well, I think getting the 11 o'clock plane up from Heathrow. I think where's my cheque?
There's a treasurer down there.
There's a treasurer. The treasurer's just had a heart attack. Yeah, she's just torn up my cheque. Look, let me just say this. Your journey here has been a very long journey. And I don't mean, how you got here by train or car or what have you, or even the dreadful taxi arrangements at the Leeds Bradford Airport. But it's a long journey. You set out a long time ago as a student, and you ended up in the surgery. And you've done that through effort, will, strong sense of vocation, and to be the professionals that you are. And that is of huge value to us all, and it means that you occupy a very special place in society. You are the most trusted professionals of all. You're the people that we first turn to in extremis, and you're the ones that see us through the darkest days and the brightest hours. And the thing I most regret was that I wasn't able, with Claire, to put an end to these bloody awful reforms.
Well, Claire. No. Where do you stand on goal line technology then? No. All right. Margaret, would you like to sum up?
To sum up, I think it's great. Whoever came up and said that they were pissed off with something in a newspaper and wrote in response and now writes a lot, that's fantastic. You know, the World Wide Web is a great thing. You can come onto Grassroots GP, where there's lots of GPs sharing their own insights about what we want general practice in the future to look at. It's, you know, if you get annoyed about something, the best thing to do is to track down the health editor that wrote it and then plead with her until they publish. That's how I got started. There was an article about CT scans in the Independent saying this was the way to stay well. It was a scandal that the NHS didn't offer them. And I was on maternity leave at the time, hadn't read a newspaper in ages. I was so angry about this that I found the health editor and said, I want to write for you. And she said, well, no, write a letter. So then she went off sick, and then I phoned them again, and they must have thought I was a real journalist, because then I got to write a big spread about how this was just completely non-evidence-based and wrong. And then that meant that The Guardian thought that I was a real journalist because I'd had something published in the Independent. And then you can just keep going, and anyone can do it. You just have to be quite, blog, tweet, interact, and I think that good will out.
Well, thank you very much, and I think the panel proves that indeed anyone can do it. Now, I have to now invite up Mike Pringle to tell us where the free drink is. But before I do that, can I actually thank the panel? I think that was absolutely splendid. I enjoyed myself immensely. I'm sure you didn't, but well done. Well done, all of you.